Hi everyone, this is our tutorial number 6. Today I'm going to show you how to subset your data so that you can plot sort of multiple variables on your plots to make it easier to look at multiple factors at once. Okay, we're going to be working with the same data set that we worked with in RTutorial 5. So I'll just refresh your memory. This is a totally made up data set where we have year, some 2000 and 2016, two different planets. So we have 17 years of data for the planet Naboo and the planet Tatooine, which you can see down here. And the data that we have are the proportion of bacterial isolates that we've taken from patients that are resistant to antibiotics. Okay. So now we are going to open up our R script, which we called planets. Clear that. Okay, and we're going to import our data into R. I'm going to add an additional note to this script so I know that we're now going to be doing a plot with additional variables plotted. We're going to import the data. I'm going to change the name of the data set in R to planet data. I'm doing that because in RTutorial 5 it was confusing that we had a data set named planets but also a column named planets. Okay, so we've imported our data. That all looks good. And now let's just look at this box plot that we made last time. Okay, so again here what we looked at was antibiotic resistance in Naboo versus Tatooine. Okay. And this is a nice box plot, but we're missing some information, which is that we know that we also have year data. So we have, for each year, what is the frequency of antibiotic resistant bacteria in Naboo versus Tatooine. Okay, this is a bit harder, right? We have to plot antibiotic resistance on the Y, year on the X, and then we need two different lines, one for Naboo and one for Tatooine. Okay, so how do we get our data set up in a way that we can look at that we can look at both points for Naboo and points for Tatooine by year? You have some different options. The one that I'm going to show you is subsetting the data. Okay, so first we create a Naboo only data set. We're going to call this Naboo, obviously. And we simply type subset. That's the subset function. We're going to subset our planet data so that we see only rows of planet data where the planets column is equal to Naboo. Okay. So what we've typed is subset. We want to subset the planet data. We want to subset it according to this command. The column we only want the rows where we have Naboo being the planet. Okay, so now look what's happened. We go from our original data set, planet data, where we have data for both Naboo and Tatooine, to our Naboo data set, where we only have data for Naboo. Now we're going to repeat this for Tatooine. Again, we'll call this Tatooine. We subset planet data. Okay, so now we have our Tatooine data set. Okay, now we're ready to plot. So what we're going to do is let's just start with our Naboo data set. So we're going to plot the proportion of resistant isolates by year just for Naboo. So we're going to say Naboo $%. So we're saying we want to plot the percent isolates resistant column, again, as our dependent variable against our year column. Okay, that's our basic graph. I want this to be a line plot. So we learned that in maybe RTutorial 4 or 3, I'm not sure. Okay, and this is simply to say, instead of plotting points, I want to plot lines. And I'm going to say I want a line width of 2. Okay, and that'll generally be appropriate if you're plotting temporal data like this. Okay, we need to fix our X and Y axis labels. I'm going to make that year. I'm going to make our Y label and of course I'm going to increase the size. Okay, that looks good. Our y-axis labels or our actual axis labels are still a bit small, so I'm going to increase those. Okay. I'm going to give a little bit of margin around the graph because it's a bit tight. Actually, that did not help. Okay. And one additional thing is I just want to make sure that my y-axis goes from 0 to 1. It looks like it might, but we'll just be sure. Okay, that's better. Now finally I'm going to give this, this line a color. Now that it's a little bit lighter, I'm going to make the line width a little bit thicker by changing this LWD to 3. Okay. Now, that's our data for Naboo. We also want to add data for Tatooine. Okay, so we do this by using the lines command. Okay, so this command, there's one called lines, there's also one called points. They do effectively the same thing, which is that they add data to an existing graph. Okay, in the case of the lines one, it adds data in the form of a line. The points command or function, it adds data in the form of points. We're going to use the lines command. And all we're going to do is the exact same thing we did above, but we're going to do it for Naboo. So we'll run that. Okay, so now you see we have a new line that's for Tatooine. Okay, it's poorly formatted, so we're going to use the same kind of formatting we use in the prior graph. So I've changed the line width to 3, and I'll give it the color sky blue. Okay, it's a little bit light. Okay, that's a little better. And just so we can really distinguish these lines, I'm going to change the line type. So that's LTY, so instead of being a straight line, which is 1, see if I write 1, I get the same kind of line, but if I change it to 2, I get a dashed line. Okay. So now lastly, I need to, if a naive person came in and looked at this graph, they would have no idea what was actually on this graph because I haven't provided any labels. So you could, in this case, make a legend. I'll show you two options. So first we can do a legend. So I'll put a legend at about the center of the graph, which I think that'll be about 2007. We'll see if this works. I want the labels to be Naboo, Tatooine, and we'll show the colors as blue. Let's see if this works. Yeah, okay. The size of that is not good, so we'll just run all of that again. Maybe shift it over a little bit. So now a naive observer could come in and they'd see this graph and they could read it. they know that orange was Naboo and blue is Tatooine. Another option is that you can add text directly to the lines, so a way of labeling the lines directly. So here I'm going to have text at, let's say, 2000. I'm going to put it at right here at about 0.9. We'll see if that works. And it'll say Naboo. And the color will be tomato. Okay, that's a little bit small. Let's run that all again. Okay. So I'm going to move that up a bit so it's not overlapping. Good. Now we can also add a label for Tatooine. Let's see if that works. Oh, it's a little bit too high. Okay. Good. I like those better than the legends, so I'm gonna make the legends silent by putting hashtags in front of them. Run this all again. And now we just have a nicely labeled graph with direct labels instead of a legend. Okay, so that is how one approach to essentially plotting multiple variables. So we have our dependent variable, which is antibiotic resistance, against our first independent variable, which is year, but then an additional variable, which is country. Okay, and so that's how you would do this with a line plot. You have other options with box plot, which I'll show in a subsequent tutorial. Okay, so we save this, and that's it.